simple as it seems, the twinkle in your eyes, the way that time slows down when you kiss me. As we fall asleep in a bed of butterflies, just close your eyes and then you'll see it. You don't ever have to look too far. You don't have to cover up your scars. You're perfect, darling, just the way you are. So before you think to rip yourself apart, open up my heart and you'll find love, 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 love. Love, love, love. Open up my heart and you'll find love. It will never grow old, even when we grow up. It's up to us to stop and smell each rose. They're the colors that we show, it's the feeling that we trust, and it's the brush that we both carry. You don't ever have to look too far. You don't have to cover up your scars. You're perfect, darling, just the way you are. So before you think to rip yourself apart, open up my heart and you'll find love, 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 love. Love, love, love. Open up my heart and you'll find love. When you're searching hard and it seems to lead to nowhere, no matter where you are, know I'll always be there. You don't ever have to look too far. You don't have to cover up your scars. You're perfect, darling, just the way you are. So before you think to rip yourself apart, open up my heart and you'll find you don't ever have to look too far. You don't have to cover up your scars. You're perfect, darling, just the way you are. So before you think to rip yourself apart, open up my heart and you'll find love, 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 love. Love, love, love. Open up my heart and you'll find love. time to heal, yet still you fight with what you're told, and hold on to your scars and wounds and paths of old. And I said, ooh, what would you do if you could lose all your burdens? Yeah. And I said, ooh, my words are few, but I love you. Those words, please hear them. Yeah. I can't begin to comprehend what you've been through. I wish it was all just pretend, just an awful dream. But please don't let your heart grow dead, for God restores and brings hope and grace and truth and life. And I said, ooh, what would you do if you could lose all your burdens? Yeah. And I said, ooh, my words are few, but I love you. Those words, please hear them. Yeah. Grace is the reason why we're both alive, so we'll pour out grace until we die. And I said, ooh, what would you do if you could lose all your burdens? Yeah, all your burdens, all your burdens.
I've known since 17, you and me are meant to be, and I can't say I understand. I just wanna hold your hand. I don't believe diamond rings guarantee us anything, but promises always true. If I can't be there with you, then I'll stay till my breath goes away. I will stay till my breath goes away. I'll stay. We didn't have to fight to find this love we now call yours and mine. Oh, this love is beautiful. Baby, you are beautiful, and I'll stay till my breath goes away. I will stay till my breath goes away. Soon my breath goes away. I will stay till my breath goes away.
Marriage is the easiest thing on the planet. Said no one ever. Ever. Ever.
This is the talk I wish someone would have given me 42 years ago.
Okay, here we go.
I don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm talking like a gangster because I'm telling the enemy he's not going to have your marriage. Somebody needs to hear me in this place. He's not going to have your marriage.
Say it, baby. Say it.
When you say I do on your wedding day, you're promising in advance, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, you'll never face a struggle without me.
Hey everybody, welcome to this XO Marriage Live Workshop. I'm so excited that you all have joined us today.
Guys, I am Scott Martindale. This is my absolutely beautiful, talented, extremely extrovert wife, Vanessa, and we lead Blended Kingdom Families. And we're also the authors of Blended and Redeemed. And today we're going to be sharing about top 3 priorities for your step family.
Yeah, super excited. And you guys, these priorities are from our book and are just a snapshot of the content. So first, we just want to share our heart behind the book. You know, this book was really written from just a place of just, I don't know, brokenness that we experienced in our own family. And, you know, our hope is that anybody who's reading this book, anybody who's in a blended family, maybe you're single, maybe you've gone through divorce, or somebody in your family is a part of a step family. You know, our hope is that you would experience one who Jesus is, but that you would find hope in this, that you would find spiritual and practical tools that you can use.
Yeah, and also there is an accompanying study guide. So if you're wanting to create groups, you can use this study guide and actually study the book.
Yes.
And have a great time doing that. And as a thank you for joining us today, we have a special discount code that you can grab the book today. So just go to blendedandredeemed.com and enter the code blended23 and you can get your book for only $15.
$15.
$15.
$15 make you holla. Okay. So, but before we get started, you guys, I want to remind you that after today, after this teaching, we will be answering some of your questions. So save some questions for us because we would love to answer those. Drop them in the chat below.
Absolutely. And so first, before we jump into the top 3 priorities, I don't think everybody knows how this came together.
How this started.
Yeah.
Okay.
I always like to tell it like I walked in, there was sunshine behind, and there was just rays of sunshine. But that is not how Vanessa sees it.
That's not exactly how it happened. So I think it's always important, husbands, you let your wives tell the story first because there's less room for correction.
A lot less room for correction if you let her go first.
For correction. No, you know, a little bit about our story. I was a single mom for almost about 5-6 years. And Scott came into our lives when my son, our oldest son, Michael, was 7 years old. And you were single, had never been married before.
I was a professional single.
Professional single.
36 years old and single, you become a professional single.
Well, you had a dog.
I did have a dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we got married in 2013. And quickly after that, we had 3 more sons. So you became a dad instantly because we had Michael.
Yeah.
And then we had 3 more boys after that. So we have 4 sons. We have 4 dogs. And it is wild, it is hairy, it is loud, and it's a lot of fun.
It is. It is an absolute blast. And getting to do ministry together now, and just seeing the struggles that we've gone through as a blended family and now getting to minister to more blended families, it's just been amazing. So we're about to come up on our 10-year anniversary.
Yeah!
We're making it to the double
We made
digits. So we're excited about that. But a big part of, our ministry and the teachings that we want to go over today is really just want to help you as a step family. So if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I'm struggling in this area. Maybe you're newly blended. Maybe you've just gotten married.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're preparing to blend and you're, in that season where you're in dating and, you're talking about marriage and you're like, hey, this is going to happen. We want to set you up for success. And So we're going to go through some principles right now.
Yeah, you guys, and this is just a really basic, just foundation, and it's the three principles or three priorities for your step family. And again, this is from chapter 3 of our book. So if you get the book, you can dive more into this. There's questions at the back of the chapter as well that you can answer. But first we want to talk about the importance of premarital counseling, why it's important, why you should do this. If you're beginning to blend your family.
Yeah, one of the things we may have left out is we're actually both therapists. I've been an LPC for almost 17 years. Vanessa is in her practicum of her master's in marriage and family therapy. So we have done a lot of counseling and have a great breadth of knowledge of that. But premarital counseling it is so important.
Very important.
Statistics will show you those who do premarital counseling have such a better track of success in their marriage. But it's just a way to meet with a biblical counselor, go through some stuff, figure out where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, have an open communication about, hey, we want to be successful here, but we need some tools. If you're already married and you didn't go through premarital counseling, go now. It's okay. Premarital doesn't always have to be pre-marriage. It can be, hey, look, we just want to go and learn where we're strong, where we're weak, how do we get better, how do we communicate better, and how do we set ourselves up for success?
Absolutely. And, some examples that we talk about in the book of what maybe an unhealthy marriage or when you're beginning to blend, what that looks like. One thing that we hear a lot from couples in blended families, and it's actually something that we experienced ourselves, is that when we first got married, having gone through a divorce and having watched my son go through a lot, I having been with him for 6 years, just the two of us, there was just this natural alliance to want to put him above my marriage and want to put him first before Scott. And so, I think that's one of the things that we see a lot with blended couples is that they really struggle to put their marriage first because they want to make sure that the kids are doing well. And then this happens in traditional families as well. But as we dive in, we're going to talk about that. And so what should your top 3 priorities be in your step family?
Yeah, so number 1 should always be your relationship with Christ. That centers everything below it. So your relationship with Christ should be number 1. Second should be your marriage and the importance of keeping that a priority. And the third should be your children. And notice that we didn't put work, friends, extended family, anywhere in that top 3. Not that they're not important, but guys, those always have to take a trailing seat to those first 3 priorities.
Absolutely. And I want to read some scripture as to, why does Christ come first? And so in Matthew 6:33, you guys, it says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All these things will be added to you. And so, first, you want to ask yourself, how is your relationship with the Lord? How is your spouse's relationship with the Lord? Are you guys, truly and actively seeking God? Is there an intimate relationship there? I know that the way you worship and the way that you encounter God is very different than how I do it. But we do come together as a couple to get into the Lord's presence, to pray together. We are both actively seeking the Lord in our own personal faith walk, but as a marriage. And we talk about, we call it the golden triangle. So if you think of God as the top point, and then your spouse is one point, and you're the other point. As you are both actively seeking God in your personal relationships, your marriage is naturally going to come together as you both are seeking Christ, and you're both going to, your marriage is going to be stronger because of that.
Yeah. And guys, I've counseled hundreds and hundreds of couples, and we've talked about this, and a lot of them get a little glass-eyed when they're like, relationship with the Lord. Okay, how do I do that? Okay, what does that really feel like and look like? Because sometimes, people who are maybe further along on that journey and, they look at like worship and they look at, spending time or even hearing from the Lord in different prophetic instances. But you may just be in this beginning stage. You're like, how do I even start that process? Yeah. Well, the first thing we say is we always recommend find a good church home. If seeking and being a Christian is important to you, having a church home should be right there with that. Yeah. So find a good biblically based church in your area. Start attending regularly. That's where you start getting poured into. That's where you start having those conversations on the drive home from church of like, hey, how did you like that message? Yeah. And how did that speak to you? These are just the first, they're like the baby steps of how do we start beginning a relationship with the Lord? beyond that, I mean, if you haven't made that decision to follow Christ, seeking out and learning about baptism, learning about what it means to accept Christ as your Savior. These are all these first few steps of like, okay, how do we start that process?
Yeah, and I think as step families, I love that you said finding a good biblically based church. You guys, community is so important. I know when we first got married and we were blending our family, we didn't have community. We did not have people who were blended families. We didn't know any blended families within our church at the time, and we so desperately needed that. We needed other people that had been walking this blended life, to help us. I so wish that we would have had that when we first got married. But again, that's so important, to find that community, find people who are going to be that source of encouragement for you and can help lift up your marriage, can help lift you guys up when you're having, those difficult seasons as well.
Absolutely.
Well, and then, so how do I put my relationship first with Christ? Because I think that that's one thing that people really struggle with. Sometimes whether we put our children first or whether we put our job first or maybe a hobby first. I love Pastor Jimmy's testimony when he talks about how he put golf first. And so, so how can they put their relationship with Christ first?
Well, really, I mean, if you simplify it down and you say, what does this look like? I mean, we only have so many waked hours of the day. So of 24 hours, you're sleeping 8, the rest of them you're awake. So how do we budget our time and what does that look like? Are we getting up in the morning? Are we? Some people really like spending time with the Lord first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And I will also say before I get into the details, I think everybody's walk can be different.
Yeah.
Just because your walk is not the same as your spouse's, doesn't mean it's not right. Just because it's not the same as your friend down the road doesn't mean it's not right. Really, what we're talking about is are we spending time with the Lord every single day in one facet or another? So maybe that is you get up in the morning and, hey, I'm a Bible reader in the morning. That is not me. I'm not a Bible reader in the morning. I wake up and I can barely find my way to the door because I'm just not a morning person. Other times, you may say, hey, I didn't get to read the Word, but I want to listen to my worship music. And I want to, I'm going to spend my car ride to work, and I'm going to listen to some worship music. I'm just going to get in the presence of the Lord that way, just so I can be centered in that. Yeah. Other times, you may say, hey, I have a Bible study that I'm going to go to, or I'm going to do a Bible study online. Today with technology, there's so many options. You can be like, hey, I'm just taking my phone out. Today, if you're on this live, you're spending time, in concept of hey, I want to learn about this. That is an act of worship as well. You're spending time learning about how do I do marriage better? How do I do blended families better? Yeah. I think the list can go on and on. You can kind of get my point of it. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but your time is how you spend it.
Well, and the thing I think with blended families is because we have so many external factors that we have to deal with. We have to deal with co-parents. We have to deal with, biological children, stepchildren, their activities. And so there's a lot of shuffle and there's a lot going on within that. And so I think being in blended families, we have to be even more intentional about our time and making time for the Lord. Like you said, I know you like to read your Bible, in the evening. I'm a morning person, but we always come together at the end of the day and pray together as a couple. And so, I think that's so important. So I think you're absolutely right, Scott. There's, so many different ways that we can get into the Lord's presence and experience Him. And hear how He talks to us.
Well, and the last thing I would say on this, I know you have one more thing too, but praying with your spouse. I've counseled hundreds and hundreds of couples, and every time I bring this up, it's almost like I get a deer in the headlights look. It's like, wait, that's my quiet time, or that's my private conversation with Jesus. God created marriage. He knows everything about you. But what He loves to see is when two spouses come together and communicate with Him as a couple, as a married couple. And so, and a lot of people feel, they feel embarrassed. They're like, well, my prayers are not really eloquent. Well, Jesus doesn't care.
Yeah.
Whether they're eloquent, whether they're, broken up, whether you can't even speak correctly, none of that matters to Jesus. What matters is that you are pouring your heart out and you're just coming together in conversation with Him. So if you're a little shy about this, or you don't know how to pray, in the book we actually write out prayers for couples, and if they don't know what to say, just say that. Or if you just want to say, hey, just thank you for loving us and blessing us, amen. But what we do is we take turns. So every night or every other night, or Sometimes when you forget it's your turn, Vanessa remembers everything except it's when it's her turn to pray.
It's bad.
So we make sure that we come together every night, grab hands, we say a prayer, and then we go to sleep. And that's just one way as a couple that we demonstrate that we want to put Christ as even before our marriage.
Absolutely. And you guys, there's just something so powerful, when you and your spouse can come together into the presence of God. You can bring heaven down to earth. You can petition on behalf of whatever it is that, if it's your children, if it's finances, if it's your health, whatever it is together, and present that to the Lord. It is so powerful. The Lord's presence is our weapon, and as a couple, man, the power behind that. So putting Christ number one in your personal life, but as a marriage, making that the firm foundation. You guys, it's just everything. But priority number 2 is our marriage,
and it's supposed to be fun.
It is supposed to be fun.
I'm telling you,
Have
you
fun.
got married to have fun. Make that the priority of having fun. So again, whether that's the time, and we're going to dive into how you can do that, but just know you guys got married to enjoy each other. So make sure you take time to do it.
Well, I think one of the aspects of marriage that, people struggle with, it's intimacy, but there's so many different facets of this intimacy. There's physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy, financial intimacy. Again, these are things that we talk about and go through the book, but we want to be intentional with all of those things.
Yeah. And again, God created marriage. He put you together. And I keep coming back to this because I want people to understand the center of where we go with this.
Yeah.
So as you've committed your life to your spouse, and then all of a sudden the busyness happens.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, we're going to tell you something right at the end of this kind of topic that's going to be extremely powerful, and I hope it blesses you immensely. But there are so many things that go on in our life that can take us away from all of the intimacy that we have with our spouse. But let's talk about physical intimacy.
Yes.
Amen.
And depending on your blended family,
Yeah.
we have 4 sons, so there's a lot of kids in the house, and so it makes it hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And so just taking that
And knocks
intentional,
at the door.
Lots of knocks at the door, you guys. So you got to get creative.
Got to make sure you have a lock on your bedroom door.
Yes. But again, you guys, whether it's scheduling, I know there's been podcasts that talk about actually using apps and using technology to make those appointments and make that time intentional. Taking those weekly date nights, like those are so important that you and your spouse are taking the time to pour into your marriage. Because your kids are going to leave the house one day, and it's just going to be you two. And if you have not nurtured, and if you have not taken the steps and the actions to grow and strengthen your marriage, you guys, we see so many couples, and we have counseled so many couples who divorce after their kids leave the house for that very reason. And so taking that time to be intentional with your intimacy is a must.
Yeah, and just for anybody who hadn't caught this already, men and women are different. So if you're in this situation and you're thinking physical intimacy sounds fun, well, understand that women experience that differently, and their buildup is different than you as a man. So understand and respect that. So intimacy physically with your spouse may start in the morning. It may start with that flirtatious text. It may start with just a really good hug to say, hey, I just want to connect with you, and saying, hey, I'm looking forward to tonight, or making sure that they feel secure and beautiful and desired. I would love to say it was more complicated for men, but sometimes it can be. Yeah. Other times it's like a light switch. You're like, okay, time to go.
Yeah.
But I will say also for men, they require and really love to be respected and honored. So making sure that you're pouring into each other. This is not one of those things that you just flip a light switch and be like, okay, it's sexy time and let's go. If you do that, not only are you going to be disappointed, but you're missing out on other opportunities to be physically intimate before actually having sex.
Yeah. Well, and we really hit a lot on the spiritual aspect of the spiritual intimacy, where we were talking about praying together. I think praying with your spouse is one of the most intimate things that you can do. It really you're just being vulnerable, and you're just laying it all out there. We talked about getting into the Lord's presence together. One thing that we also talk about is emotional and financial intimacy. Checking in with your spouse, seeing how they're doing. I know when he is off, and I'm like, hey, are you struggling? Like, what's going on? Like, let's have a conversation about it. Maybe it's that you have a therapist that you go and see. We are big proponents of biblical counseling, you guys. Even the therapists need therapists. And we go to maintain our marriage. It's seasons we don't even have, there's not anything wrong or going on, but we go so that we're maintaining and that we're getting poured into ourselves because we pour out so much. But financial intimacy, this is a really big one with step families, you guys, because a lot of people will come into the blended family, and what we see a lot of is that the one spouse, so maybe it's the step parent or whoever it is, will start to build up a lot of resentment for child custody, for payments and child support, things like that. And so whenever you're beginning to blend in your marriage, we always recommend having those conversations before, because when you come together, you are one and your finances are one, and that child support, that is a part of your responsibility and your budget. And so that's one aspect of intimacy that we really see with step families that, if not dealt with, can really blow up.
Well, and whether you're step family or just in a nuclear traditional family, financial intimacy is so important, because and that doesn't mean that you have to absolutely share every responsibility financially. There could be one of you that is naturally gifted in that area, that handles the finances. That is perfect. That's okay. The point of this is you want to make sure that you're checking in with your spouse to say, hey, do you have any questions about our financial position? Do you understand if something were to happen to me, what you would do or how you should do this? Are there any questions that you have? This is opening the book. As you go a step further and you look at it and say, well, we have a budget that we want to stick with. Okay, well, let's make sure that we're doing the things that are not hiding intimacy financially, which is hiding purchases or going outside your budget.
Should go to Target again.
Yeah, Target's a dangerous place.
It is a dangerous place.
But making sure you're having those conversations and those checkpoints to say, hey, we have a financial budget that we want to stick with, and this is part of your intimacy. I know we've talked, we look at it and say, well, this is numbers. No. This is the intimacy that you share with your spouse. This is in line with making sure that you're putting your marriage as a priority, because all of these factors affect your marriage. The physical aspect, and this is the financial, we're going to talk about the emotional aspect, but all those affect your marriage. So having those open and honest conversations is the key.
Well, I love that you said that, because that goes into my next point, which is daily check-ins and weekly check-ins. So again, we mentioned this in the book, you guys, just get the book. But one thing that Scott and I do, not only do we have our daily check-ins, and I'm picturing it right now, because he has his chair and I sit on the bed, and we just talk about the day after we've put the boys down. We talk about our day. We talk about our happies and crappies, like what was good, what was bad. But every Sunday we have a marriage meeting and we have a business meeting. Business meeting is really our schedules. We have 4 sons in activities. We are heavily involved in our church. We do a lot of ministry. So that is just kind of like our schedules, what's going on, who's going here, who's picking up who. But then we have our marriage meeting where we're talking about, like, where do we want to go on our marriage retreat? Where do we want to go on our vision retreat? We were just talking about our vision retreat the other day and where we're going to go and planning that, and talking about what we want to do for our marriage, setting goals for our marriage, and the things that we want to do in the year. And again, you guys, it's taking that intentional time, after our relationship with the Lord, to put our marriage first, and make sure that we're doing the things that will strengthen it and grow it. Yeah,
the last thing you want to do is leave a little thorn in the side that's going to fester over time. It's also an opportunity to say, hey, listen, we didn't get a chance to talk about that when it happened, but this happened on Wednesday, and it just really kind of bothered me, and I just want to have a conversation about it so that it doesn't fester over the next week. I don't know how many families I've counseled that's like, well, this happened 3 weeks ago. Well, have you talked about it? No, I didn't say anything. You cannot be apathetic in addressing issues with your marriage. But it's always good to have that scheduled time to say, like, hey, we may not talk about this now, but let's talk about it in our meeting.
And again, guys, step families, we know the craziness. We understand the busyness. We live it ourselves. And so, we know that kids are coming in, kids are coming out, going to co-parents' home and back and forth. And so with step families, I just feel we have to be so much more intentional about it, and being sure that we are creating that time for our spouse. But moving on to priority number 3.
Those little kids.
The little
Those
kids.
little kids that can stifle intimacy, but we love them anyway.
The tiny humans.
The tiny humans.
Yes.
Or maybe your humans are not so tiny. Maybe they're adult children, or maybe they're like we have a 16-year-old who
17 next month.
Who kind of thinks like he's 25.
Yeah.
Which is kind of just odd. But we're going to talk about kids. And again, let me state these first: our relationship with Christ, our marriage, and then our children. This is probably the number one issue that we see in blended families is, and you stated this earlier, children are the first.
Yeah.
And I understand the concept. I understand that parents, especially biological parents, look at their children and go, what I have done has hurt you. I don't want you to feel that way again. So I'm going to put you as the top priority to make sure everything aligns with everything that you want. And everything else comes after.
Yeah.
And that's where we see, and we talk about statistics, we've listed a lot in the book, but we see failure of blended families, and a lot of reasons that is why. We've seen countless comments, stories. My husband, my wife puts their children above every one of my needs, and they have for years, and I just cannot do it anymore.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that, first of all, that we understand the order. Now we're going to tell you why that's important.
Well, I think with children, we have to create a safe place for them. Children thrive in environments of routine and structure, and especially in blended families. When children have experienced, I'll use the word trauma or turmoil of a divorce, giving them the most structure that we can, giving them a routine, they are going to thrive in that type of environment. And so whenever we can, provide that through our marriage, and through co-parenting, well with our co-parents, we're going to create, a great environment for them. But there can also be, confusion with the back and forth, and there can be conflict with blended families. We understand that. We've been in seasons of that ourselves. So again, it's just, I love this quote by Pastor Jimmy. He says that, if a marriage is what hurt your children, a healthy, strong, godly marriage is what can help heal them. And so, as long as you and your spouse are showing that you're coming together, you're showing that unity, and you're putting each other first. They may not understand it now, but then years later, they're going to look back and they're going to have this godly, amazing example of what you did. And they're going to be able to mirror that in their future relationships.
Yeah, and just understand that just because it's the third priority doesn't mean it's unimportant.
Right.
What we're really going with is to make sure those other two become a time priority.
Yeah.
You can spend as much time as you need with your kids. I mean, children feel love specifically with time. Whether you are just reading a book or playing a video game or outside throwing the football or just diving into what they care about, that's how they feel loved. That is not unimportant, and it's not something that you don't want to spend time with, but you don't do it at the sacrifice of your marriage or the sacrifice of your relationship with Christ. But it's still very, very important in the process.
Well, and I think the important thing too is understanding that, our marriage is, next to our relationship with Christ is the most important thing, and our children are that after. So when you come home from work, when you walk in that door, that is the most important ministry that you have when you walk into that door. And if you're walking through your door and you aren't able to give to your children and you aren't able to give to your spouse, you guys, you've given too much in other places. And so, I think about that with our blended family. It's like when I'm walking through the door, I am giving them my best throughout the day, or that evening, And so I think having that mindset, every day that we come home, are we giving them our best? Are we saying no to things? I know we went through a season of, we were just like, yes. And let me tell you something, you guys. Good things are not always God things. Even though it's, hey, we want you to lead this group at church, pray and ask God if that's what he wants you to do, because you may not have the capacity to do it. Even though it's a good thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's what God wants you to do in this season. So, one thing that we always do is we always pray at the beginning of the year at our vision retreat, and we're like, God, what do we need to lay down in this season, and what do we need to pick up? Again, in blended families and in step families, there's a lot of picking up. And there's a lot that pivots, and there's a lot that changes. So making sure that you have margin and capacity to do that for your children is so important.
Yeah. Let me just repeat one thing. Saying no is a great thing.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting somewhere where you can say it, just be like, no. When somebody asks you to do something, no. When your kids, they're like, hey, I want to play all these 28 sports. No.
No, just one.
No. You can pick one. You can pick two, whatever that looks like. Because when you say no to something, you are saying yes to something else.
That's good.
And then when you say yes, you are saying no to something else. You only have an infinite amount of time during the day.
Yeah.
7 days of the week, then it repeats. So the control and the authority that you speak with as a parent to say, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're not going to do. This, again, all these priorities that we're talking about, relationship with Christ, your marriage, your children, and then we just kind of like flow up this thing and say, what are you saying yes to? And how is that gonna support all of these things?
Yeah.
Because if you've said yes to everything, if your kids are in 6 different sports, I talked to a family yesterday who said, hey, we don't have time to go to church on Sunday because we have volleyball. What? How, because you've said yes to this, and I'm not saying volleyball's not important, that's cool, but is it more important on a Sunday morning that you're at a volleyball tournament, or is it more important that you're at church? Because if you said yes to this, you just said no to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that I want to mention too, and with saying no, is you guys protect your evenings and your weekends. Again, in step families, you have the transition of homes, right? And so it may be few and far between, or every other week, or whatever your custody agreement is, that all of your children in the home together. That time is precious, and we don't get that time back. So when we have all of our biological children, all of our stepchildren in the home together, protect your nights and weekends. Again, say no. Make family date nights. Our boys just learned how to play Monopoly, and let me tell you, when you have 4 sons, it is competitive.
Yeah, it is.
Competitive. And our 7-year-old.
Except for the ones that don't care about they're too young and they're just like, and they win all the time.
They
ones
win
who
all
don't
the time.
care.
Our 7-year-old wins and he just wants the money. He doesn't want to buy property. I'm like, we are teaching you property management. But again, you guys, being intentional with that time and making time to do things together as a family, as a blended family. This is going to help strengthen your family. It's going to help create bonds. It's a great way to get close to your stepchildren. Like, if you're kind of struggling in that, doing something together as a family is going to facilitate unity. It's going to help build peace, and it's going to help build relationships.
Yeah, you don't want to not be there, and this is, if you get really personal about this, you say, hey, when it comes to those, hey, can you have dinner tonight? No, can't do that. Hey, can we, spend our weekend doing XYZ? No, I need this with my family. I need to rest. I need to prepare for the next week so I'm not completely burned out. I mean, saying no and protecting your weekends and your evenings has probably been one of the best things that we have practiced.
Yeah.
We didn't practice it at first. It was like, we'll do everything. But over the last few years, it's one of the things that we have really dived into and said, no, we eat dinner every night at 5 p.m. That's exactly what time we eat. And then after that, it is nobody's around us. It's the kids. It's enjoying that. So as a blended family, if you're out there, just you can have authority to do this. And I understand that you may want to do other things, but the reason we talk about these priorities so intensely, and we talk about it in our book, we've talked about it on our podcast, it seems like 1,000 times, is we understand what we're up against. And we see, as a blended family, the trajectory of success and non-success.
Yeah.
And we looked at it and said, hey, and Pastor Jimmy, we've quoted you like 3 times now, just because we love him so much. But he says it very clearly, so I don't want to take credit for it. He says there is 100% chance of success in marriage when you do it God's way. All of these priorities are biblically referenced. This is what we've learned from the Bible that says, hey, this is how to do it.
Yeah.
And I believe that if you do this, it's 100% chance of success.
And for your blended family.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we talk about it so intensely. And we know that, as you guys have been listening, you may have questions and you may have things that you want to ask us. So we're about to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions, jump it on, type it up. We're going to get presented to us here in just a few minutes.
Yes, you guys. And we're going to pray out real quick, and then we'll get started with your question. So I'll pray us out.
Sweet.
And then we'll get started. So, Heavenly Father, we just love you and praise you, God. We thank you for this day. And God, we just thank you for this time together. Holy Spirit, we thank you that you were with us, just speaking in and through us, God. And Lord, I just pray for every marriage out there. I pray for every blended family that is listening, God, that they just received something from you, Lord, that just really touched them and touched their heart. God, I just pray for your shield of refuge and strength over each one of them. God, we just ask that you go before us in everything that we say and everything that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Awesome. So you guys have sent in some great questions. So just before we do that, I wanted to remind you of our exclusive discount, which is Blended 23, and you can get the book Blended and Redeemed for $15. It's like less than, it's not less than a Happy Meal, but it's like 2 Happy Meals.
I don't know.
Anyway, you can jump on blendedandredeemed.com, use the code BLENDED23. It is a page turner, and just a reminder, it does have a study guide. We have Blended and Redeemed groups going all over the nation.
I am so excited. We just had like 5 new groups sign up yesterday. I mean, all over. If you go to the website, you can click on the map. It's super interactive, and it'll show you where there's a group, whether it's a home group or a church group in your area. So, and if you want to lead a group, we need you. So you can email us at info@blendedkingdomfamilies.com, and we'll get in touch with you.
Super fun stuff. You can actually be involved in the ministry and use your story to encourage other people. So study guide, book, $15. Boom. Do it.
Boom.
All right, so we have some questions. We're going to jump into one of the questions. Okay, I like this one. What are some creative date night ideas?
Oh, I've got one. Okay, so.
Are these gender specific?
They are gender specific. So, and we've actually done these. So Scott and I take our date night every Thursday. We're actually going tonight for date night with another couple, which is super fun. Always love doing double date nights. But one date night that we've done, it's not exactly my favorite, but I'm going to enter into my husband's world and do the things that he likes. But it was the gun range. I'm a little scared of guns. But you really enjoy it. Our son enjoys it. So going to the gun range, that was really enlightening for me. I learned a lot. We learned that if we ever had to use a gun in our home for some reason, I should not be the one that does it. It should be Scott. Now, but we've also done date nights where he has joined me in a pedicure.
That was awesome. In fact, I may actually tell you, I mean, getting a pedicure actually is pretty good. So if you haven't done that, or you're listening to this and you're like, I don't do that. And we're going to do one soon. We're going to do a Botox one, like a date night Botox.
Something Scott was saying he needs to fix the wrinkles around his eyes.
I'm coming around, and if you're a dude and you're listening to this, like, we got to come around. There's some cool stuff out there that we're not tapping into, that our wives can introduce us to, that may seem kind of girly, but really are cool. So
super cool.
That's what you should do.
Men, you will love them. You guys, there's a wide range of things that you could do.
What are some other date nights that you can do?
Get a karaoke bus to take you somewhere. I love karaoke. Y'all, one time we left an event and we had to call, we were out of town, so we were Ubering everywhere we went.
Had to Uber.
We Ubered into a karaoke van, and it was like
the
heavens parted open and came out, and oh my gosh, it was so much fun. From the 5 minutes from this location to this location. Had a blast. But
you can also, we're big fans of staycations. So if you have that ability, I don't care if the hotel is like across the street, that is better than being at home sometimes. So take an opportunity, walk over there, drive over there, grab somebody to stay with your kids, and then just take a little staycation. Sleep is beautiful, and you don't get enough of it. So take an opportunity.
And the staycations, you know what that means.
Yeah, you get away a little bit.
Wow.
Those are good things.
Work on that intimacy.
Yeah.
Into me.
And there any other date night creatives? Go find a new restaurant. That's always a fun one. Go explore. Like, we live in the DFW area, and we kind of get in our little bubble sometimes. So go explore something.
I like that.
Yeah. But I'm just going to leave you with, dudes, go do a manicure. It's cool.
It's cool.
All right, next question. Let's see. I've asked my husband to pray with me, but he doesn't want to. What can I do?
I would say, this is something we've talked about a lot in our podcast as well. And we actually get this question a lot. And what I would say to that is, we can't always control what our spouse does. We can't always control what they say, but what we can control is what we do. And so if you're in that position where your spouse doesn't want to pray with you, understand that God can change the heart of anybody. And I would just say, continue to pray for them, continue to pray for their heart. Maybe it's that you seek out some wise counsel. I don't know, maybe you can find another couple who could be mentors for you guys, and maybe, go about it that direction. But, I know one thing, especially when we first got married, our prayer lives were they were separate. And then we finally got to a point where we started coming together. And so understand that it's a process. Understand that it can take time, and just having that patience with your spouse during that. But also, while you're in that waiting season, understand that God is with you, that you're not alone in that. And again, I think just continuing to pray and pray for their heart and pray for your marriage.
Yeah. I would also say this, don't just automatically assume that your husband doesn't need encouragement or doesn't need reassurance.
Yeah.
Spiritual life isn't something that a lot of men are taught, being like, okay, this is how you get strong in this area, and this is what you do with that strength, and this is how you lead. Most men are taught, the physical side, the provide side, and really that's kind of the end of it. So if your husband's in that season, like, hey, I don't feel comfortable praying, look at that as an opportunity to be like, you know what, let me go back and kind of reinforce him as not only as a good provider, but as a great leader. And somebody who you appreciate. These are opportunities that he may just need to be poured into that way. He may need that reassurance. And then slowly but surely, just kind of asking him, hey, I know we didn't pray together, how's your prayer life? Is there anything I can pray for you? And then the last thing I would say on this is just don't assume it's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it does take time. I know, even for Vanessa and I, when we first got married, her church experience, the churches that she had gone to versus the churches that I'd gone to were very different. So it took some time as we started getting together and going, okay, this is how you worship. Do I feel comfortable that way? And this is how I worship. Do you feel comfortable with me okay? And that took time. That was an uncomfortable experience when we first started. Prayer was the same thing. She prays a long time until I have to give her the squeeze.
He squeezes my hand, and I'm like, don't mess with the prayer.
But 20 minutes before going to sleep. So anyway, but I'm a short prayer, so I pray really short. And that is okay. And maybe that's something maybe your husband feels intimidated by.
Yeah.
Like your relationship versus his relationship. Just to reassure him, hey, wherever you're at, man, I'm with you.
Yeah.
You're a child of our God, and I love you, and he loves you, and where we're at on this journey, it's okay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and next question, you guys, what are some things you can do in preparation to blend or become a step parent? And this is coming from a soon-to-be stepmom that's in the chat.
Yeah. So I am the prodigal step parent in our group. So as preparing, and I will say this is different. Stepdad versus stepmom, I think, are two very different things. Mainly because of the pressure that we put on ourselves versus the pressure that a stepmom puts on themselves. And I will say, every blended family is unique and different.
Yep.
So we don't know, based on this question, I don't really know how involved the biological mom is in the picture. I don't know if it's to a son or to a daughter. That makes a difference. I would say first, be prayerful about your place as an additional parent to this child. So what does that look like from a step-parent perspective? One, you're creating bonds with them. So you're preparing this and understand that children bond through having fun. So you want to make sure that you're spending time having fun with them, getting to know them, being their friend, understanding that your first responsibility is to love their parent, their biological parent. So that's a big part of that. Don't get so caught up and consumed with, child doesn't like me, child doesn't respect me, child won't listen to me, bio mom hates me. Don't get consumed in that. The responsibility first is, make sure that you're taking control and you're putting that marriage first. Be patient in this process. Read stuff. I always say, I wish I knew the things I needed to know.
Yeah.
So, we talk about step parent a lot in our book. There are other books out there that talk about being a stepmom. And the last thing I'll say is don't get toxic. Just don't.
Yeah. Well, you kind of hit 2 of the 3 points I was going to
Yeah.
say: prayer, patience, and persistence.
Yeah.
So those are 3 things that we talk about, and we talk about them in the book. But being prayerful in your step-parent role and over your stepchildren, being patient in that process, letting that evolve naturally and not trying to force it, and then just being persistent in the pursuit of your stepchildren. You will sow and you will sow and you will sow, and you may not see the harvest anytime soon, but I promise it will come later. That was my situation growing up. I come from a step family, and my dad is one of my best friends now, and so I just remember that process, and he just was always persistent in the pursuit, in pursuing me. And I just want to say one thing: never, as a step parent, never diminish or undermine your influence in your stepchildren's life. There is an eternal, I don't know if the term is reward, but I came to know Jesus because of my stepdad. He changed my life in more ways than I could ever begin to imagine. So never underestimate your influence in your stepchildren's life, because I promise you it's probably more greater than you will ever know. You will probably see it on the other side, in heaven, than you may here on earth. But yeah, I just want to encourage you guys with that.
All right, so our next question is, this person is currently going through a divorce, and he is challenged that he's facing with during co-parenting. My former wife and I have different values and household rules from the books.
From the looks.
Oh, from the looks
From
of
the
it.
looks of it.
You know, I'm blind. I can't read too well.
My 2 daughters
Yeah.
and son tend to prefer the parent that is lenient. Is there some tips to raise my children without them looking at their parents as a friend or foe?
Yeah. So, first, and we've addressed this in a lot of ways, but divorce is a very traumatic event for children, and they are, in a lot of ways, very much, detached from their stability. So they're detached. They're kind of imagine kind of just floating above, house to house to house. So they're going to attract to the thing that they find most enjoyable when they find an enjoyment here. So sometimes that is the lenient parent,
Sure.
the parent who lets them stay up, the parent that buys them whatever. That's what they're going to attract to, because at the end of the day, they're searching to enjoy themselves. And this is not their preferred, but they're just looking for the enjoyment.
Yeah.
And that could be really challenging, especially when you're beginning this co-parenting relationship, because you're trying to be the parent, but you're trying not to be the parent that they don't want to see. So what's the best methods that people can use?
Well, I think, again, like I said earlier, children thrive in environments of routine and structure and stability. And you may think that they don't want that, but it's really what they crave. What we found in our situation is, there was a long season where we felt like our son just didn't even want to be in our home. But now I think he really loves that. He feels there's a safety there. I think that with parents who are, so to speak, not the lenient parent, and they're the ones that have more of the discipline and more of the routine and more of the structure, understand that children feel safe in that environment. And maybe for them, when they go to the other parent that's more lenient, like Scott said, there is a lot of fun in that. But I would say continue to keep doing what you're doing. And as children get older, that emotional intelligence kicks in, and we've seen in our situation, we've seen a change in that, and so I would just say don't grow weary in that, but keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I can't read the next question because I'm a little blind.
What's a good first step for us as a couple if our priorities are not in line with what you've shared?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think a lot of times you would say, from a couple perspective, you'd say, well, we're a blended family. We're kind of 3 or 4 years down the line. It's not great, but it's working.
Yeah.
It hasn't been destroyed yet. And the question you may ask is, you hear us talk about these priorities and you say, is yours as good as it should be or could be? I know I kind of referenced this earlier in the video, but if you're looking for how do I have a stronger relationship with Christ, we talked about find a church, find a good Bible-based church that you can go and just be there. Just go sit there, try to make some friends, try to listen, try to get poured into. That is a great first step. Another first step, if you feel like your marriage has not become a priority, prioritize date night. Thursday night is our night. We don't let anything come between that. Nothing will, unless there is a the freeze and you can't move, you just, that date night is Thursday night. Making sure that you're not bringing your work and you're able to prioritize your children, that you're not just constantly on the phone or, doing those things. Those would be great first steps, just first steps. And if none of that actually, if you go like, I don't know how to do all that, set reminders in your phone and be like, hey, this is what happens. This is my schedule. This is what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I think that, it's just the intentionality behind it. But you kept saying, like, a first step can be this. I think you just have to take a first step. I think you just have to take a step in that direction. So, if your relationship with the Lord, if you're like, man, I have not been doing quiet time, I have not been praying, like, you just got to start somewhere. Just start somewhere. Maybe it's, okay, I'm going to open up my Bible, I'm going to spend 15 minutes with the Lord. Or I'm going to go find a church. I think you just have to take a step in that direction and let the Lord and the Holy Spirit guide and lead you in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this next question is...
how do we balance the priorities we are trying to implement in our blended family when my former spouse has no respect for these priorities? Okay, we've been there. Been there.
So, okay, so let's unpack this question in a lot of ways. I'm just trying to get an answer here that I want to say. So, first of all, we want to congratulate you and praise you for having those priorities. And without fail, I know you feel like maybe this is an attack on you or there's elements that are making this hard. But if these are your priorities, stick with them. Stick with them. And so that would be my first suggestion. My second suggestion, and you probably have some more, is understand the concept and how to set boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries are such a huge priority in blended families. And this can be really, what's really interesting is this weekend I'm teaching a Bible study on James 1, and I'm going to be talking about removing the filth from our lives. And it uses the word filth, but I want to translate that into some different things. But really is, what are you allowing into your house? Is it, the text messages that fly off the chain? Is it the phone calls of being yelled at? Is it, continual rudeness? Whatever that is, you have authority in your house to set boundaries around, hey, this is what I am willing to deal with.
Yeah, and we hear this a lot, you guys. We hear a lot of couples, they'll reach out to us and they'll say, I still feel like my spouse's previous marriage, it's a part of our marriage. And I think you brought up a great point, because boundaries is where I was going. And you guys, boundaries are biblical too. Setting those boundaries, again, like Scott said, what are you allowing to come in and coming out? And you have authority to say, hey, like, that stops at the front door, or you're not going to speak to me that way. Or, if it's changing your style of communication, if it's not face-to-face, maybe it's through technology. I think there's a lot of different things that we can do to protect our peace and our marriage and our children and our home.
Yeah, and you might find if you looked at another priority and you said, well, I'm trying to prioritize my marriage and date night's a priority, but, and I'm sure this has happened, but you get ridiculed or criticized from your other spouse of like, why did you leave the child with a babysitter that night?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's okay. You can do that as their parent.
Yeah.
You have the ability to say, hey, this is our date night. I've hired a qualified nanny to watch, our child.
Yeah.
You're not going to make me feel guilty about this because I'm making sure that I'm prioritizing my marriage to have that date night.
Yes.
So don't allow yourself to be bullied in that way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our last question, you guys. My husband has a different set of rules for his kids as we do for mine. We have 6 together. He also makes decisions for his kids, and I don't have a say. This makes me feel isolated. How can I express this to him without him feeling like I'm getting in the way of him as the head of our home? That's a good one.
Yeah, we see this more often than not, his kids, her kids, and we talk about this a lot in the book in terms of what discipline looks like, especially as you're beginning to blend, and we look at that and say, hey, we want that biological parent to take precedent. Now, there could be some instances where, I know that's the thing about blended families, there's so many different circumstances, different ways this works.
I think at the end of the day, a united front is going to be the best thing. And I know as wives, we don't want to overstep our husband's authority or leadership. And so I think it just takes having an intentional conversation of, hey, you guys, or hey husband, wife,
Yeah.
we want to be on the same page, because children pick up on that, and that is where manipulation will come in from your biological children and stepchildren. So I think having a united front is very important. Like Scott said, when you're beginning to blend, a lot of times it's just better to let the biological parent lead for the time being, and then over time you make that introduction, and you as a spouse need to back up your spouse, back up the step parent, so that your children know, like, hey, they have authority to speak into my life too.
I would just say this too. There's really two ways that I would like verbally address this, and one of them I think is wrong, and the other one I think is probably a little bit easier to do. If you said to your spouse, why do you treat your kids different than mine? Well, that's an antagonistic type of comment. And it may be what you want to say, and it may be that question. You're like, why do you do this? Why do you treat them different than my children? The reverse would be is if you had that conversation and said, you know what? I think and I feel like our children should have the same set of rules. Don't you? It's one house. We're their parents. How can we work together so that all of our children kind of follow the same set of rules?
Yeah.
And you may have different ages of children, but again, the second way to address that is not a attacking way. It's like, hey, listen, I'm in line with wanting our marriage to be a priority, and part of that is, hey, we need to communicate, and I need to have your back, and you need to have my back.
Yeah.
I think our children are treated a little bit differently, and I'd like to work together to make sure that we do this cohesively together.
Oh, that's good.
So.
That's really good. Well, you guys, thank you for joining us today for the XO Marriage Workshop. Don't forget to take advantage of our workshop discount for our book. It's valid today only, so just visit blendedandredeemed.com and enter the code BLENDED2023.
Yep.
And you can connect with us at Blended Kingdom Families everything.
Yeah.
.com.
Blended Kingdom Families on Instagram, Facebook. You can join our mailing list and get updated, all our newsletters and all the cool stuff.
All the cool things. And we are so excited because we will see you at the XO Marriage Conferences coming up this year.
Yeah, so we've got Grapevine, we got Houston, we've got Corpus.
All of them.
So go to xomarriage.com. You'll see the conference schedule. If you have not attended an XO, do it. It is so much fun.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, if you're a guy and you're watching this, man, you tell your wife, like, we're going to XO conference.
That's right, baby.
Because I'm going to tell you, when you leave there, she's going to be excited. And she's going to be just in love with you, and you're going to be in love with her as well.
And you guys, Grapevine only has 50 tickets left.
They only have 50 left.
Wow.
So, wow.
Wow.
So 50 tickets left. And one last thing, if you're not in Texas or you can't make this Grapevine, you can also watch it online through xomarriage.com, and you can actually stream it to your house, so you can do a little intimate date night.
XOnow.com.
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 Yeah.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for being here with us today. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that it encouraged you. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Y'all take care.
Be blessed in all that.